Thanks for your attention. Thank you very much for joining us today for this panel discussion on defending the freedom to marry. I'm Connie Ryan Terrell, and I'm the Executive Director of the Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. I also am proud to say that I am a longtime board member of One Iowa, serving on the board of directors for about 6 or 7 years. I also chair Justice Not Politics, which is the primary organization in our state that is working very hard to defend our Supreme Court and the work that they do in our state. So I welcome all of the panelists that we have brought together, a greatly talented and knowledgeable group of folks. I welcome you as attendees here in the room, and we also have folks who are participating online, and I welcome you to this discussion. I'm going to get started, and kind of the setup for the day is that each of our panel members will speak for about 5 to 7 minutes. And I will be diligent in asking them to stop at about that time. So forgive me if I rudely interrupt them. They know that. I will do that so that we can keep ourselves on time, and also provide time for questions and answers, which we will hope to have about 30 minutes of. We will take questions from the audience here, and we will alternate that with questions via Twitter, and I'll give instructions about that a little bit later after our panel members speak. So for now, I would like to introduce on my far left, Mr. Zach Walls. Zach Walls, as you may know, is a 6th-generation Iowan, a proud Hawkeye, the son of 2 lesbian mothers, an outspoken advocate for marriage equality. Since a video of his testimony about his family before the Iowa House Judiciary Committee and the full Iowa House and senators who were present became a YouTube's #1 political video of 2011. He's continued to share his story and advocate for full equality under the law. He has appeared on the Ellen DeGeneres Show, The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell, and other media outlets. Zach is the author of My Two Moms, Lessons of Love, Strength, and What Makes a Family, published in spring 2012 by Gotham Books, an imprint of Penguin Group USA, and Zach lives in Iowa City, Iowa. Welcome, Zach. We also have Sharon Malero over here on my immediate right, and Sharon is One Iowa's founder and board chair. She is also a senior shareholder and current president of Davis Brown Law Firm. Sharon is a longtime advocate for civil rights issues relating to the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered community. She was appointed by the Iowa Supreme Court to serve as a member of the Iowa Supreme Court's Task Force on Gender and Racial Bias in the Judicial System. After the completion of the task force report, she was asked to serve as a member of the Iowa Supreme Court's Monitoring Committee, which was charged with the duty to ensure that the recommendations by the task force were implemented. In addition, Sharon provides pro bono legal counsel for the AIDS Project of Central Iowa and is one of the cooperating attorneys for Lambda Legal Defense and Education Fund. Mr. Jim Bennett is the Midwest Regional Director for Lambda Legal, the oldest and largest national legal organization committed to achieving full recognition of the civil rights of lesbians, gay men, bisexuals, transgender people, and people with HIV. He's responsible for expanding Lambda Legal's organizational reach in 10 states. In 2009, Lambda Legal won a historic and unanimous victory for marriage equality in Iowa. Jim was a leading strategist of Lambda Legal's educational and media efforts in Iowa. Working in partnership with One Iowa, Jim helped create and implement a broad, layered grassroots program throughout the state, educating thousands of Iowans and building sustained support for marriage equality rights in America's heartland. And last, but certainly not least, we have Ms. Donna Redwing. Donna Redwing took over as the new One Iowa Executive Director on July 1, and we want to extend a special welcome to Donna for coming to Iowa and joining us here in this great state. Previously, she served as Executive Director of Grassroots Leadership. She's also served as Chief of Staff of Interfaith Alliance in Washington, D.C. She was one of 3 members of the Obama Kitchen Cabinet on LGBT concerns and was Howard Dean's outreach liaison to the LGBT community. Donna has held many leadership positions at Gill Foundation, Human Rights Campaign, and Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. While directing the Lesbian Community Project, Donna was featured in a Sundance award-winning film with the 1992 struggle against the radical right and their ballot measure 9. Donna was the first recipient of the Walter Cronkite Award, the premier award by the Interfaith Alliance. And in contrast, I think this is her crowning achievement, during the Dean campaign, she was named in a Des Moines Register article by the Christian Coalition as, quote, the most dangerous woman in America. And I would like to get started with our first speaker, Zach Walls.
Thank you very much, Connie. And thank you all for coming out this afternoon. It's awesome to be out here in Des Moines and actually to be on the Drake campus in particular. My tall mom, Terry, is actually a Drake alum. She probably doesn't want me to tell you when she graduated, but she's she went to school here in the area, and so it's good to be here on campus. We've only got 7 minutes, so I want to keep this relatively quick. But as Connie mentioned, I kind of got launched into this entire thing by a YouTube video of me testifying here in Des Moines at the state capitol about House Joint Resolution 6, which was the proposed constitutional amendment to reverse the 2009 Supreme Court decision, one by Lambda Legal in one Iowa, that legalized same-sex marriage in the state. And luckily, HJR 6 went down in flames in the Senate when Senate Majority Leader Mike Gronstal refused to put it up for a vote. But that was a defining moment for me, not only because it launched this kind of opportunity for me to get out there to continue to share my story and talk about my moms and what it was like growing up with same-sex parents, but also because it really defined for me the first time in my life the challenges politically that we continue to face. Now, I'll never forget back in 2004 watching the Republican National Convention and seeing some of these folks stand up and talk about marriage and how we need to protect the family from the great gay menace and all of that fun stuff. And so it's actually very appropriate that we are having this town hall meeting on the first day of, I guess, the canceled first day of the Republican National Convention. Who likes God now? God, sorry, that's just two, you can't miss that. But it really was a defining moment for me because, then I was in 8th grade watching these very official, very powerful, very presidential-looking men in suits, a bunch of old white guys, stand up and talk about how they needed to protect American families from other American families, but they didn't want to describe us as such, and that was really an important moment for me. So my story really is pretty straightforward. I was born back in 1991. I was actually born I was accidentally born in Wisconsin, and we moved down to Iowa when I was 9, and I've lived here ever since. And, growing up, there were some challenges that I certainly had to go through having same-sex parents, even in the People's Republic of Johnson County. It wasn't, always easy. The fact is that kids are sometimes vicious, little buggers, and they will do really mean things to people, who are not like them. And so whether that difference that you experience growing up is a difference of having divorced parents or a single parent or gay parents or parents of a different religion than most of your peers, whatever. People want to look for those challenges, but one of I think the most important tasks for folks in my position who do have parents who are of the same sex is to define how people who actively work against marriage perpetuate and really exacerbate the challenges that kids in my situation go through and that LGBT people go through. in the state. And so whenever, we were out on the road, not this past week, but the week before, all over the state with One Iowa for their Why Marriage Matters tour, talking with folks down in Council Bluffs, up in Sioux City, Mason City, Plymouth, Forest City. We were all over the western and northern parts of the state. There were a lot of questions, I think, from some people who have very serious interests in trying to figure out what this marriage stuff means for themselves and for the kids of gay couples, and what that really is going to look like in our state. But what we've seen, I think, very conclusively over the last 3 years now, is that the sky hasn't fallen. Hell has not opened up and swallowed Davenport, Iowa, despite an Onion article about that, which I would highly recommend. Divorce rates are down. So all of the doom and gloom that we heard from some folks who wanted to go out there and actively campaign against marriage equality and LGBT rights generally, like, that stuff just hasn't come to pass. And this is not like a controversial statement. This is an observation of truth. So I think when we have these conversations, it's very important to do so, in respectful, courteous ways. I think there's a very real difference of opinion between a lot of folks on our side and a lot of folks who are, stand in strong support of traditional marriage. But I think it is also important to emphasize that, supporting traditional marriage and actively working against gay marriage are two entirely separate things. I have a lot of friends. There are, in fact, a few conservatives in Iowa City. But these are people who are not angry, hateful people who do believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, and helping them understand that you can support one while not actively working against another, that there's in fact more than one correct definition to a religious belief, or the rights, as Donna often likes to talk about, R-I-T-E-S of marriage versus the rights, R-I-G-H-T-S of marriage, and helping people really separate those two in terms of the law and how that affects their own lives is, I think, one of our most critical challenges over the next few months as we move into the election. Because I think there are a lot of people who are really trying. There was a woman in Sioux City, actually, who came out to one of our lunch and learns who was very, very conflicted on this issue. She is a passionate evangelical woman, went to an Assembly of God congregation and was very, very religious, but also had a direct connection to LGBT rights, and so was really struggling to reconcile these two different parts of who she was. And at the moment that we tried to dismiss her or that part of the conversation simply because she might not necessarily be using the right words or fully be on board with everything that we're talking about, that's a day that we start moving backwards as a movement. And so one of the things that we have to do is, in the face of all the negativity that we are seeing that so many other folks are bringing, we have to remain eternally positive, and that's really hard. There are a lot of days when I was in junior high school, where it was not easy to stay positive and it wasn't fun or what have you, but it's really important work, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to be out here with One Iowa doing this kind of stuff. It's very important. So with that, I'll turn it over to the woman who started One Iowa. Thank you very much.
Perfect timing. Sharon Malero.
Thank you, Connie, and thanks, Zach. Good to be up here with you. Well, one little bit of history lesson for me, I guess. The One Iowa Education Fund began in late 2005 after the Iowa Supreme Court's ruling in Allons versus Woodbury County. In that case, several Republican legislators challenged a district court's authority to annul a Vermont civil union of a lesbian couple now living in Iowa. The court's ruling, along with Iowa's long history of being proactive in the area of civil rights, gave Iowans the drive to seek repeal of Iowa's DOMA. And just so you understand our history of civil rights, 26 years before the United States ratified the 13th Amendment, Iowa's Supreme Court declared that no man in this territory can be reduced to slavery. Nearly a century before Brown versus Board of Education, Iowa rejected a separate but equal system of public education for African American children. Iowa was the first state to admit women to the practice of law, and the home state of the nation's most heralded advocate for women's suffrage, Carrie Cat Chapman. So along with that history, we knew that the courts were going to do the right thing if we brought the challenge. Before the Varnum suit was filed, One Iowa Education Fund worked to build awareness about the inequities of Iowa's DOMA for same-sex couples. One Iowa held public forums across the state so that people could understand what the issues were going to be and would be a little bit more informed prior to the lawsuit was filed. After the lawsuit was filed, it was fairly quiet while the courts were deciding the issue. It was decided at the district court level on a summary judgment motion. We didn't have a trial, and then it was appealed to the Iowa Supreme Court, where it was argued, and that's, I think, the interesting thing about Varnum and the Iowa Supreme Court, and I think what's interesting, too, to many of the detractors of the court, the Iowa Supreme Court dedicated a specific page on their website to all the Varnum filings, so people could receive or read the briefs as they were being filed. On the day of the oral argument, the Iowa Supreme Court aired the oral arguments on television so people could, across the state, could watch. I remember watching the oral arguments in my lunchroom at my law firm because I knew I wouldn't get a seat in the courthouse. So Iowa was open, and the Iowa Supreme Court was open about this whole process during the process, despite the fact that people are now saying that there was no justice in the public. After the decision came down, by agreement of the parties, we asked the Supreme Court to stay the decision until the time period for ruling on a further review came up. And then at that period in time, people then started to get married. In that interim period, though, One Iowa worked with county recorders to help them be prepared for the onslaught of people coming to get marriage applications. After that, I think the attack was launched on the judiciary. People are polarized by the decision, and we've had problems with people fighting about the decision, and the one way that they've chosen to retaliate, in the way I term it, is to seek the removal of the justices who were on the court at the time through the judicial retention process. Historically, the Iowa judges are appointed by the governor, and they stand judicial retention every couple of years after they're appointed. The judicial retention process is to remove judges who are acting inappropriately in office, not to remove judges because you don't agree with their decisions. However, this judicial retention process has turned it on its head, where judges are now being told, if you don't rule the way we want you to rule, we're going to remove you from office. I have had the opportunity to speak with the 3 justices who have been removed on numerous occasions, and they will always say that they will do this again knowing that they would lose their job, because that is what they are there to do justice and not to do what the whim of a majority want them to do. I guess I would direct you to the quote above here: "Justice is the end of government, it is the end of civil society. It ever has been and ever will be pursued until obtained or until liberty be lost in the pursuit." And to me, that's what the judicial retention election is about, and why we're here talking about these things and maybe dispelling rumors. So,
Great, thank you very much, Sharon.
Jim.
And we have Mr. Jim Bennett from Lambda Legal, and he's going to put this into context with the national movement. Jim?
Thank you. It's great to be back in Iowa and not on my bike. The Iowa was critical to our movement, to the marriage movement. To all of us, it felt like a watershed moment. I mean, we wanted to have the decision come down and be unanimous, where there was no party divide, but it was just a sense of fairness and equality. It was a beautiful decision. It was very plainly written. I'm sure many of you have read it, and it's an extraordinary piece. And it also sent a message to our country that before that we had only had marriage. When we filed, we only had marriage in Massachusetts, and up until then it had been seen this coastal phenomenon, but to have it right in the center of the country, and of Iowa of all places, it's known for just common sense values and fairness. Took a that just makes me think of you, Zach.
Sorry.
Really changed the debate. It changed the focus of everything, and it certainly was a body blow when the 3 judges were not retained. And I guess to piggyback a little bit on Sharon's comments, it was such a spiteful and intimidating move to go after these justices, because here they're doing their job. They realize by taking out the justices, they're not changing the marriage decision. The next day, gays and lesbian couples continue to get married in Iowa, and now thousands have. It was to send a chilling message to judges across the country that you're going to be bullied and intimidated if you take a courageous stand. And we haven't completely seen that yet. It's been pretty positive. There was a lot of good developments. I credit Zach, which we talked about on numerous occasions, of really changing the narrative. After that election, things felt really negative and rough, and then all at once you had this young man just talking about his family, and it allowed people to refocus about what the issue was about. We have Lambda Legal has 3 marriage cases currently. We have one in Illinois that we just filed on May 30th, a case in New Jersey where they've had civil unions that were court-ordered by the New Jersey Supreme Court, and we put a process in place to determine if they were equal to marriage, and we found, not surprisingly, that a second-class system did not work. And then we also have a marriage case in Nevada. And more than anything, I believe it's vital for the GLBT community, and really all of us as Americans, to watch this election in 2012 and make sure this justice is retained. None of our judges should fear their decisions. They should not worry about public opinion. It's the one part of our government where they're there to look at the Constitution and make a decision based on what's right. And that's what what that court did, and really what it is up to our movement to make sure that we're not asleep at the wheel again, and that we make sure that justices are protected and they have the room to move. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jim. And now we're going to move to Donna Redwing, who is going to talk about Iowa and the role of Iowa in the heartland, and specifically the role of One Iowa.
Okay, and I'm also talking a little bit about retention, right?
Sure,
Okay.
that'd be great.
It is a pleasure to be here for many reasons. We moved to Iowa, my partner and I, because we've been together for 26 years and we want to get married. Iowa is the place that feels like home. I also came to work at One Iowa. Our mission at One Iowa is to support full equality for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered people, primarily through grassroots efforts and education. Everyone in this room knows that the struggle to maintain marriage equality is far from over. At One Iowa, we've launched a campaign called Why Marriage Matters, and we're trying to shift the conversation from politics back to people. We're focused on having meaningful conversations in every corner of the state about the importance of marriage, love, commitment, and family. And I would not be an organizer if I didn't ask you today to pick up one of these pledge cards. They're at the end of every row. We're asking you to simply have 5 conversations over the next few weeks. 5 conversations about why marriage matters to you. A simple ask. And then we have some other asks if you'd like to check those boxes, but we are really asking for those conversations. The latest move to oust justices is, as we know, an outrageous assault on our courts. Clearly, justice is not at the center of that campaign. It is politics at its worst. And you've heard today, the Iowa State Supreme Court honored the Constitution and made a fair and reasoned decision when they unanimously ruled in favor of the freedom to marry for same-gender couples. As you know, the Iowa State Supreme Court has always valued the individual rights and equal protection of its citizens. The Varnum decision was just another example of the values that Iowans hold dear, the values of fairness and justice. At One Iowa, we are very clear that we do understand that this assault on our courts is not only about fair courts and justice retention with integrity, it is about same-gender marriage. We know that Iowa is a better place because of marriage equality. We're a state that values families. We're a state that values fairness and justice, not the corrupting influence of politics and money. Many of you saw a poll in the Des Moines Register. 56% of Iowans oppose a legislative measure banning same-gender marriage. Yet political leadership has used words like arrogantly and deceitfully to describe the Varnum justices. They talk about the bullying activist judges, and they call for the ousting of the fourth Varnum justice. Activist justices, when have you heard that phrase? You may remember that other high-profile decisions cited as judicial activism include Brown v. Board of Education and Roe v. Wade. Others using that language did not believe that blacks-only public schools were unconstitutional, and they worked against integration. They believed that women did not have the right to make decisions about their own reproductive health, their own bodies. And so today we have a movement here in Iowa towards politicizing the one body of government that was created to be intentionally free from politics, the courts. That movement today is aimed against couples who simply want to marry the person they love, who want the same rights and responsibilities of other loving families in sickness and in health. It's about depriving families of the right to be heard and make decisions when a loved one is ill or dying. It's about disproportionately unfair tax, financial, and emotional burdens for these couples. A New York Times analysis recently said that the lifetime cost of being gay can cost a moderate income family as much as $467,000. It's a movement that we believe is mean-spirited, it's bigoted, it's designed to maintain a second-class citizenship for our families. And that movement seems to have forgotten what Martin Luther King said a long time ago, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. We know that the great Constitution of Iowa is right. We know that the Iowa Supreme Court justices were right. We know that in this struggle for equality, we do have justice on our side. So at One Iowa, we're going to travel across the state. Prior to the retention vote, we're going to talk to people about the real impetus for our adversaries to call for the ousting of Justice Wiggins. We will, in living rooms and town hall meetings, online and in person, with shoe leather and mouse pads, we will speak to the need to maintain the integrity of our courts and to keep justice retention separate from money and politics. I believe that there will be a day when we look back at all of this and we say, this is who we are. This is who we were. This is where we stood on equality. These were our friends and our allies. And together we will know that we stood on the right side of justice. Together we were truly one Iowa, fighting for freedom.
And now you know why the Board of Directors wanted to bring Donna Red Wing to Iowa. Thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists. And I think we should give them a round of applause, all four. And now it is your opportunity to ask questions, whether you are in the room or whether you are with us virtually online. We will alternate between questions here in the room, and if you do have a question, you need to come to the microphone that is over to my right, just at the bottom of the steps. And for those who are online, you can tweet us, and the wonderful Maddie Smith will be taking those. And you can tweet at hashtag #WhyMarriageMattersIA. Again, hashtag #WhyMarriageMattersIA. And we are hoping that someone from the audience here in Des Moines will start us with a question. It can be directed at any of the panelists specifically, or you can throw the question and we'll figure out who you need to come to this microphone. Yep, thank you, sir. And we'll figure out who is the right person to answer it. I know that you are going to pass 6 microphones on your way, but you're going to go clear over to the other side. Thank you, Ed.
Quite familiar with this room. I used to teach trial advocacy in here. But my question is for Mr. Walls. You spoke of the fact that when you were in high school and maybe even in the younger grades, you oftentimes, or maybe not often, but you did confront bullying as the result of having 2 moms.
That's right.
I'm the grandfather of 2 grandchildren whose parents are both married. They're females, and I'm concerned about this issue coming up. And I'd like to know what advice you would give to all of us here. Cindy and I brought our grandson today so that
I met him.
we could hear that. But I'd be most interested to know what your experience has been and what you would advise people to do.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm glad to hear that you're concerned. You should be. It's not always easy growing up with same-sex parents, especially in the Midwest, and even in a relatively, a progressive community like Des Moines or Iowa City. There are still going to be challenges. We also have to remember that a lot of people are growing up in places that are not progressive at all. In fact, if you had to guess which region in the country is the fastest growing population of same-sex parented families, it's the South. Not exactly a bastion of liberalism down there. So as a community, I think sometimes we can forget that, and sometimes we don't necessarily provide the support that needs to be provided. And the reality is that gay parents do need to be aware of the situations that might arise as a result of the views of some people. Now, something that I think is extraordinarily important to say again and again and again, lest it be taken out of context by the other side, is that the challenges I went through were not the result of my parents. They were the result of how some people view my parents' relationship. That's a very important distinction. But in terms of actually, doing the right things to make sure that your kids are not going to be in a compromising situation, you need to make sure that kids understand who they are and what their family is, and the fact that there are some people out there who disagree with that family structure, and honestly being cognizant of the fact that your children might go through some hardship based on the reality of your relationship is an important first step. I think I've met plenty of parents who are in denial about that. Whether that's because they grew up in a place themselves where it was relatively safe, or because they think that kids just need to deal with it and be proud and what have you. But that's not the reality. So being conscious of the fact that there might be some hardship, explaining why that's the case to your children, but then also empowering your children to stand up for themselves when they feel they can do so. I've also met a number of kids who felt like they're under a lot of pressure to stand up, when sometimes that's a very painful or difficult thing to do. And at the end of the day, I think that we can't forget that the single most important thing is getting through the day. If you're a kid growing up in Grinnell, Iowa, I'm not necessarily going to tell you that you need to stand up and wave a rainbow flag. I mean, you need to do what you need to do to get through the day, because there are still so many people out there, and that is a cultural mindset that is perpetuated and amplified by folks like Mr. Vanderplatz. That has, desperate, dangerous unintended consequences. So we really do have to combat that as much as we can for those of us who are adults. But if you're a kid, my primary concern is getting you through the day.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And may I just add that you can go to our website, www.oneiowa.org, and there are places you can go if you or your child is being bullied, that there are safe schools projects, that there is help, there is assistance, and so thank you for that question, but I think we need to tell people where to go. Go to our website, and you can hook up with the programs that'll be helpful.
Yeah, and Donna, thank you very much for mentioning that too. Iowa has some of the best laws on the books to protect kids in those situations. Unfortunately, there are a lot of administrators, a lot of teachers, a lot of people in government who either don't know about these laws or disagree with these laws, so you might not hear about them very often if you're growing up in a rural community, but those laws are there. And if, enforcing them means talking with somebody at Lambda Legal, or any other law firm, that is your right as an Iowan. You have protections under the law. Use them.
I don't know if we have a question yet from online. Maddie? No. Okay, we're going to go to Mark Rosenberg.
Thank you. This question's for the Lambda Legal representative. Within the last 12 months, the Wall Street Journal had an editorial about the wisdom of the Maryland Supreme Court to not rule on marriage equality, but to punt the decision back to the legislature. And I believe that the legislature is going to vote, or there's a referendum. And their argument was it would be a broader acceptance if the legislature did it instead of the courts. What's your view of that?
Well, obviously our work is in the courts, so we certainly believe that if a group is being targeted, a minority group is being targeted for unequal treatment, it's the role and the obligation of the court to remedy that situation. So I believe the court should rule in favor of the minority that are being treated unfairly. They should have been granted marriage.
I think what you're seeing is judicial retention elections coming into play. It's easier to punt, and courts can, if they want to, than to do what their job is.
We did see with the 3 justices that lost the retention vote in 2010, all 3 have stood behind their decision. This year they received the Kennedy Medal of Courage, Profile and Courage, and it's an amazing decision that they will be recognized for all of time when we look back on this, which is not very far off. Already we've reached majority support. Many people are asking why this continues to be such a large issue. They will stand on the forefront of bringing this civil rights issue forward.
Maddie, any questions coming virtually? And a reminder to our watchers online that they can tweet us at #WhyMarriageMattersIA.
I saw one that was tweeted at Lambda Legal, actually.
Want to read it?
Yeah, Jim, maybe you could handle it. It was a question about New York, actually, but it's very relevant to Iowa. So it was a New Jersey couple that was getting married in New York State, but had to shift down to a civil union when they went back to New Jersey. Why is that the case? And how would that affect an Iowa couple or another Midwest couple that came to Iowa to get married?
It's similar in Illinois. So for example, in Illinois we have probably as good of a civil union law as you could have, but it's still not marriage. So if our representative, one of the representatives who voted on the bill, Deb Mell, she wanted a real marriage, so she came to Iowa. And got married with her wife, and they came back to Illinois, and Illinois recognizes it as a civil union, so it gets downgraded a little bit. And it's really based on the state law, so it's state by state interpretation, and then it's also recognizing what is equal to or for that court or that state to recognize how close that civil union law is to the marriage law, but it would be the same. So I believe in New York, if you were to get married in New York, then you would be married in Iowa, and you would be civilly united in Illinois and New Jersey, and as you travel, your laws change, and you go south, you have nothing.
Right. And there's a national component to that as well, DOMA.
Correct. So we have DOMA, and we're seeing 3 cases now that are before the U.S. Supreme Court. DOMA has 2 parts. So one is that it allows the federal government to not recognize, so to not get the benefits or Social Security, things like that. And then it also creates a division so that states don't have to recognize marriage between states. So we expect that to be in the court. They haven't decided whether or not they'll be hearing that case, although it feels likely.
Right. So even though Iowa doesn't recognize marriage between first cousins, we have to recognize marriage between first cousins of a South Carolina couple, if they're straight.
If they're straight, I would guess so, if that's the South Carolina laws. But
Well,
I
it
would not
is,
wanna
but, I mean, and it's not to judge or anything, but just to kind of observe a discrepancy in the law.
I'm sure those cousins really cared about each other. They're probably very.
Moving on. Do we have other questions from the audience? Yes, sir. Yes, all the way across, sorry.
Hello, my name is Brien, and I'm a student at the University of Iowa. I'm here with Kelly, who's director at the National Association of Social Workers. First off, it's really awesome to be here today. A few years ago, I moved from Minnesota to Iowa. Of course, Minnesota doesn't have civil or gay marriage up there, and in the process of living here, I remember about 6 months after I moved here, the civil marriage had been passed in Iowa, and I remember standing down at the Papa John's building in the back watching the speakers kind of celebrating that passage of that law. I guess my question is that, well, this past December 31st, I should mention, I also got married to my best friend. It's been about 6 months, so 8 months, so I'm pretty excited about that. My question is, I guess this, and I just need this to be explained to me in kind of a layperson's terms. Aside from the judicial retention topic going on, what does the future, or what challenges are we looking at in the upcoming years as far as my rights and my marriage here in Iowa? I know it seems pretty clear I'm married, but is my relationship in jeopardy if I decide to stay in this state? And what immediate things am I looking at as far as what my marriage means to me here? I'm not sure who would best be able to
Let's start with Donna. You want to take a crack at
I haven't
that?
been an Iowan for 5 weeks. What do I know, right? But I do know that while Iowa has really led the way, if we take out the kind of coastal states, we really are, I think, the blueprint for the rest of the nation. But I do know that should you and your husband?
Yes, Donna.
Congratulations.
I love using that word also, so it means something to
I
me
wanted
to
to
be
make
able
it special.
to
You and
use
your
that
husband.
word, yeah.
I mean, there are so many rights of marriage, and also if you and your husband bring children into your lives, you know, where do they stand? What are their rights? And so I think that we have this great, great victory in Iowa, that we have to get up every day and maintain and deepen and strengthen. I think it is certainly not over, and I've heard people say, oh, it's over, we can stop now. This is just the beginning. Really, I would wake up every day and try to figure out what's the one thing that I can do today to strengthen same-gender marriage in the state of Iowa. That's what you need to do. And we have legal experts who can talk about that part of it.
Sharon, you want to take a crack at the legal side?
Yeah. What I would say to you is our next hurdle is avoiding a constitutional amendment vote or getting the state position to, if we do have a constitutional amendment to vote on, that we know that the majority of the voters in Iowa will vote against it. It will take a constitutional amendment to undo Varnum. And we have people nipping at our heels that want to have that come up to a vote. That's why you still have, I think, the Vander Platzes out there to kind of keep that base going. And so his one way of doing it right now is judicial retention, so he can keep that out there at the forefront. They're going after Mike Gronstal because he's not wanted it to come to the floor for debate. So it's also becoming involved in the political process and finding out what candidates support you and your needs. I read an article not too long ago online about a young man wrote to his father who was a Republican, and he's been a Democrat, and he said, I've never really wanted to argue with you about who your choice is for president, but this year it does mean something to me because I now have a candidate in one party who supports my right to get married. Never has happened before. And so this is a personal issue. This is about me. This is about my spouse, who you have accepted for 22 years, and our children. And so having those difficult conversations with people about why it matters is critical, and why this particular election, I think, is extremely important to our rights and maintaining our rights. And after the fact today, if you want to talk to Senator McCoy, I think he would kind of echo that as well.
Jim?
I did want to say, I believe your marriage is safe in terms of I don't see the state coming in and breaking up relationships, and the constitutional amendment process, were it to begin, would take years, and support is on our side. But the only thing we can look at in something like that is California, which is really the first time we've seen rights taken away. And in that case, those 18,000, I guess, people were remained married, and then it reverted back to the domestic partnership, which is really equivalent in many ways to a civil union. But again, it's a state right, and so it's something that we just don't want to see rights being voted on anyway by the general public. That's not the way America should be working. But I think you and your husband have good years ahead.
Thank you all.
Zach, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, by all means, sit down. You've been standing out there for a minute.
No, it's fine. There's just one more to go here.
Fair
so.
enough. How many folks had the chance of watching the Brien Brown, Dan Savage dinner table debate that took place a couple weeks ago? Anybody? Okay. I highly recommend it if you have an hour to kill. I know nobody does, but it's this great hour-long dinner table debate between the executive director of one of the most virulent anti-gay marriage groups in the country, the National Organization for Marriage, and Dan Savage, the much beloved sex columnist and outspoken LGBT rights advocate. And it is really a great profile in how a lot of folks who are opposed to gay marriage are trying to use victim status to make their argument. And I want to just talk about this with you standing up here, because nobody is trying to take away Bob Vander Platz's marriage. He will never come up to this microphone and get emotional talking about the possibility that the state will separate him from his wife. This is what persecution looks like, right? Victim status is not about being in the majority, right? By definition. As a straight person, I am not worried about my own marriage rights, and Bob Vander Platz shouldn't be married about his. Like, this is absurd. The idea that somehow his marriage is weakened, that his religious beliefs are debased or demeaned by the fact that the state is recognizing other beliefs, is rooted in an idea that he is entitled not to equal status, but to greater status. And with that paradigm, with that worldview, that is the only way that we can really understand the attempts by some of those to whom we are opposed on this issue for them to try and paint themselves as the victim. So thank you for standing up and sharing that.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Excellent point.
Could I just add, I'm sorry, could I just add one more thing?
Yes, you may. And then I'm going to actually say something too.
I don't think we should, not every Republican stands against marriage.
I agree.
And there is a group, Iowa Republicans for Fairness, that is coming together, and it's going to be doing some amazing work. And for those of you who are Republican or who have Republicans in your circle of friends or family, I don't think it's fair to just say, this is the line, and if you step over it and stand here, you're not with us. I think our great challenge is to maintain the friendships and the strength we have on one side, and then to really find those places where we have support on the other. This is about families. This is about who loves who. This is about rights. This is about stuff that is so much bigger and goes so beyond politics that I am not willing to cede one Republican to the other side. I think that everyone who's living and breathing in Iowa has the opportunity to embrace same-gender marriage, and I think we have to work that every single day. So that's your job.
And even though I'm the moderator, I'm going to say that that is about a fair-minded legislature, so making sure we have fair-minded legislators there, and it's about protecting our court, and you do that by having conversations. So going back to what Donna said about 5 conversations in the next few days, and then have 5 more conversations. So I'll go back to moderator now. So thank you very much. Sir. Oh. Okay.
Technical
Maddie.
difficulties, so I
Okay.
apologize. I think you may have already answered this question, but if a judge won't campaign for themselves, how can an active citizen help?
Well, I think Justice Wiggins is doing some campaigning this time, but how the average citizen can help is to go online to Justice Not Politics. I think you'll get some talking points that will help you talk to your constituents about why voting is important. I think what's interesting about the judicial retention component of our ballot is it takes extra effort to vote because you have to flip that ballot. And most of the time, I get calls all the time at my office from the voting booth, okay, I'm looking at these judges, who should I vote for, who shouldn't I? Because the average person really doesn't come in contact with the judge on a daily basis. Really, the majority of the people who vote don't participate in the judicial election process. So flipping that ballot is very important, and voting for the judges and explaining to people that you have that duty to do that is, I think, critical.
And did you have another just to catch up on Twitter? And then we'll go to this gentleman over here.
Sure. What's the single most important step we can take to advance the cause of marriage equality both locally and nationally?
Donna, I think, wants to answer that.
I think we have to be out. I think we have to be out as neighbors, as friends, as colleagues, as family members. I think coming out is probably one of the most difficult things people can do, but it's also one of the most courageous things that people can do. And we're often surprised that everybody knew we were, lesbian or gay or bi or trans anyway. But if we're not out, if we're not living our lives, I like to be in the grocery store in Port Sumitra. I'll see somebody and say, let's go over and talk to them. We saw a fellow with a little equality sign, and we just chatted him right up. I think we have to be out wherever we are, not just at Pride, not just in this room, not just with our friends on a Saturday night, but in the grocery store. Turn around and say, hey, I'm a lesbian. Let's talk. What's going to happen? To be out wherever we are, and then we're not the other anymore. We're the neighbor that feeds their cat when they go on vacation. The lesbian neighbor. We're the gay man that, not only looks fabulous, but is a great colleague at work. Let's break the stereotypes. Let's show people who we are. And if we are married, let's have that pride in that marriage. Iowa is such an extraordinary and I think almost miraculous place. Look what you have. You have to be out about it every day of your life. It's not just a Saturday night thing. It is every minute of every day. I think that's what we have to do.
And I would say, well, first of all, I'm completely out at work, and it's gone awesome. But
Lambda Legal.
I had Lambda. But
You have to come out if you're straight, actually, Lambda.
we out the straight people, but we accept them. But I think it's just as important for families and straight people and our allies to come out. I think that's what makes Zach so incredibly powerful. Was that it was a different speaker and a different spokesperson, and Lambda Legal and our sister organization, Illinois Equality Illinois, were at the Illinois State Fair, and we were shocked about the great support we had, but some of the most powerful people that came over, there was this sort of a terrifying, gigantic guy from Southern Illinois that had his daughter with him, and he came over, and I thought, this is going to be an uncomfortable situation. He didn't look friendly, and he started to sign the pledge, and when his daughter asked him why, he goes, "Because I would do anything for you. I want you to know that right now, I would do anything for you." And then she started crying, and we started crying. But I mean, that's what it is. It's all of us calling it out every single time that these are our families.
Yes, sir, you've been waiting a long time. Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank you for helping support my rights. As an older gay man, it's interesting, I wasn't always that concerned about gay marriage. I mean, it's something that never entered my mind that much. But when people started talking about taking a right away from me, I became concerned. I remember the days when we were a psychiatric diagnosis. I remember when local policemen used to walk into the gay bars and arrest every other person because they were in a house of ill repute for simply having a drink. We have supported our rights. We have strengthened those. Younger people today are fighting to maintain these rights. For me, it's important to know who is and who isn't supporting them. And I'd also like to ask the panel if you're familiar with how much money, actual money, is coming into this state to try to take my rights away.
Anybody want to start? I think we'll do a quick answer too, because we have two more questions.
I know that NAM has agreed to match, that's the National Organization for Marriage, their marriage. They've agreed to match up to $100,000 in this state, in this struggle this year.
They've sent, I think, twice that much.
They put over $1 million in 2010.
10. And then we had money from American Family Association as well that was equal or greater to that as well. So there's a lot of money that we expect for 2012.
I think one of the most important set of numbers, though, to take away from the the justice fight, in 2010, was the fact that 95% of the money spent against the justices came from out of state. 95. Money to protect the justices, only 10% of it came from out of state. There's a huge disparity, and you really have seen efforts by people who do not live in Iowa, who are not affected by our laws directly, try to influence those laws and to intimidate our justices. And that's bullying, and we're not going to take it this time around.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I feel but odd being up here with so many people who are so good at speaking, but
You're fine.
being a trans woman, and I suppose this is more directed towards Jim than anybody else, but being a trans woman, marriage rights get even a little bit more complicated. For instance, I can marry another woman, a cis woman, but in many states I wouldn't be able to marry a cis man because my gender marker is still male. And something that I was wondering about for many, transgender individuals and anybody else is while that gets kind of simple, when you actually are already married or in a relationship and then changing your gender marker, which is tough enough as it is, what happens with the marriage laws, in Iowa, of course, in particular, but around the state and federally after you change that gender marker?
Jim?
It's probably something I would refer you to. We have a lawyer that focuses specifically on transgender law, Drew Levisar, that works out of our New York office, but nationally. But again, like you've heard in this discussion, it's a patchwork of laws. Rights are changing as people cross state lines, and for transgender people, the challenges are even greater, as you define, because does that state recognize the transition, and then how does that apply to their marriage laws, and if you move to a different state, what are the divorce laws, and how would that work? So it's it's probably way too complicated for me to give you a good answer, and I'm not the expert on it, but I certainly would connect you with Drew. Thanks.
We know that it's 1 o'clock, and if folks need to leave, it is fine to do so, but we're going to stay here and answer questions if we're able to. Maddie, do you have something?
Is there any state where the movement for equality has presented a solid business case, for example, benefits to the government?
In Minnesota, we are seeing the business community rally around this issue in a huge way. There are a number of Fortune 500 companies that are based in the Twin Cities, and they've pretty much unanimously circled around supporting LGBT rights. They recognize that not only is this the right thing to do from a principled position, but also pragmatically speaking, this is where, consumers are, they're voting with their dollars, and that, when you have a company that is outspoken about protecting rights, that's good business. I mean, look, it's something like almost 95% of the Fortune 500 has non-discrimination hiring policies in place on the basis of sexual orientation. And we have 32 states, I think, in the country that still have, or something like that. It's over 30 states in the country that still have not passed into law non-discrimination policies on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. When it comes to hiring. So the private sector really is actually getting this right, and that really has been one of the biggest victories in the last 2 years.
I think Iowa did a really good job of making a business case when we passed the amendment to the Iowa Civil Rights Act to add sexual orientation and gender identity to our non-discrimination statute. We had business leaders in Des Moines lobbying legislators on why it was going to be easier for them to attract quality employees to come to Iowa if there was the inclusion of gender orientation and gender identity and sexual orientation in the Civil Rights Act, because people are looking to work for companies that are more inclusive and diverse. And so we, I think, did make the business case for it, and we did get the civil rights amendments passed.
We're going to take the last two questions, I think. Frankie?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having this today. I want to ask this question due to my history of being involved with hate crimes against the LGBT community. In the times when the states are going through these arguments, do you see a rise in hate crimes, meaning that there's rhetoric going on while these votes are going on, and do you see that adding to the violence? And also, what is the stats now on states that have legalized marriage equality? Are hate crimes rising in those areas, or do you see a decrease in them?
Donna?
Well, I can only speak to my experiences over the last 20 or so years. When, and specifically around LGBT issues, when a community of people, when their lives, who they are and who they get to be, is up for a vote, what I've seen is an increase in violence against them. When people can actually consider, is that person as valuable as I am? What we see is that hate crimes do escalate. However, when the vote goes the right way, and I'll use the examples of Oregon and Colorado, Ballot Measure 9 and Amendment 2. Ballot Measure 9, we saw an escalation in hate crimes against LGBT people, and those considered to be, thought to be LGBT. There were more than 1,800 crimes against LGBT people that were reported in that 12-month period. When the citizens of Oregon voted against the anti-gay bill, so voted with the LGBT community, that number just plummeted. In Colorado, while the number escalated through the campaigns, when Colorado voted to discriminate against LGBT people, the number escalated. So when who we are and who we get to be is up for discussion, we see extraordinary violence against LGBT people. That's my experience.
Any other comments?
This is a very, powerful, emotionally powerful issue on both sides. And look, just what was it, 2 weeks ago now, there was a shooting in Washington, D.C. at the Family Research Council, a very prominent anti-gay group, in which thankfully nobody died. But it is indicative that there are, unfortunately, crazy people on both sides. So now that being said, 1,800 hate crimes against LGBT people kind of pales in comparison. And again, the fact that so many of those groups rushed to use that and again play the victim card was a little disheartening. But at the same time, I think it is just very important to recognize, hate doesn't come from a vacuum, right? It is the result of a number of factors, and we have to be conscious of what those are and work to address those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maddie?
What role can conservatives/Republicans play in protecting marriage equality in Iowa?
Donna?
I'm sure we all have answers. I think they need to be out there, they need to stand with us, they need to say that equality is neither red nor blue, it really is lavender, right?
Right.
They need to stand with us, they need to have the courage to stand with us on this issue.
And I think, with Vice President Cheney supporting his daughter, so happy that she's getting married, shouldn't we all have that? And there's so many examples. Ken Mellman, who was one of the architects of these anti-gay constitutional amendments, and then of course he came out. So, but he has been working, and granted he has a lot to amend. But this is his opportunity, and he's been using it, talking to people, and I respect that courage. And again, it's putting a face to the issue. It's telling your stories and sharing your family's experience. And when people say something that does not hold true to your experience because your son or daughter or brother, cousin, friend is gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender, to call it out and to make people aware of the person that's right beside them.
And our last question.
Hi, my name is James, and I'm a father and a husband, and we have a 16-year-old daughter, and I would just like to thank One Iowa and Lambda for all the work you do, because I believe it will benefit my little girl tremendously. And I just had a question for all of you. Do you have any ideas or strategies for how to emphasize marriage equality and civil rights in general as being pro-family and being just standing up for family and so forth? That's something I care deeply about, is family and equal rights for everybody, for any couple that wants to have a relationship legalized and have that protection. That should be for anybody. And any ideas for how to put that into a pro-family focus? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think it was a perfect one to end on, and who would like to start?
I thought your words were beautiful. I think you're already there. That's exactly what your daughter needs to hear, and that's what all of us want to hear. And I have a brother 5 years younger than me and a sister 5 years older. And there was a point when my parents told me, I want the same for you, although sometimes their marriages haven't always been great either, so I hope to do a little better now and then. But
sometimes most aren't.
Life is hard. But you want the same for all of your kids. You want them all to have the same shot at happiness, the same opportunity for happiness, and I think your daughter's lucky to have you.
Zach?
So my memory isn't quite as extensive as some other people, but I just Googled old anti-gay actress, and Anita Bryant was the first hit, which is very appropriate because that's who I was looking for. But Anita Bryant used to go around the country talking about how homosexuals were a threat to the family unit because they led purely hedonistic lifestyles. They did not engage in procreation. They did not have families. And they didn't contribute to society. They didn't have a stake in the next generation. And now all of a sudden the threat is that gay people want to have kids and they want to have families and they want to have a stake in the next generation and they want to be a part of our society, and this is a problem. This is ridiculous. I mean, you don't have to, be a debater or a lawyer to understand that you can't have it both ways. Either you are a threat to the family unit because you do not want a family, or you're a threat to the family unit because you want to, this doesn't make any sense, and this is what cognitive dissonance looks like. So I don't have a lot of patience for people who try to make the argument that somehow gay couples getting married is against the family. And I think that I would agree with Jim. The words that you used to describe your own situation are spot on. Because even though there are some people who want to drag this into the realm of politics and get down to mudslinging and name calling and what have you, the politics of fear and division that are so prevalent, this isn't a political issue. It's really not. This is about people. It's about family. It's about brothers, sisters, parents, children. And I think what the story that you just spun for us was spot on.
One of the strategic and tactical decisions that was made during the Varnum case was to amend the original petition to add some of the children of the plaintiff couples, because we wanted the court to understand that we were not just talking about two couples or a couple of couples, we were talking about families. We were talking about children who needed to know that their parents were as valid and valuable as any other children that they went to school with, that the whole family unit was as good as any other family unit that's been created. And so I think that we've set the course and we've set the bar on marriage being about families, not just about two people. We've included people with grandchildren, children, and I think it speaks volumes, and I too appreciate your words, because what we did and what we're trying to do obviously is working.
And I'd like to say thank you. I'm sure that there are some GLBT people in this room who would do anything to hear their dad say what you said.
Thanks. To
The
me,
revolution.
That's just what a father is about. It's about protecting his children, regardless, anything. That's what you say, just right. Just your kid is your part of you. I don't get the hate and the politics, and I just can't comprehend it.
So, the politics are important, I think, and the courts are important. But at the end of the day, it's about a father who loves his daughter.
Right.
And will do anything to make sure that she has the same opportunities, that she feels just as loved and just as valued. That's the revolution. That is how we move forward. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
And let us thank each of our panelists and those who asked questions and all the audience members who have tears in their eyes. And those online, thank you to all of you. Your interest in defending every person, every family, the freedom to marry is important. You have to be involved. If you heard nothing at all today, hear that. You have to be involved. It's important. You can get involved through One Iowa at oneiowa.org. You can get involved at Justice Not Politics at justicenotpolitics.org. You can get involved at Lambda Legal, I assume at lambdalegal.org. I don't know that for sure, but you can Google it. And as Donna said, and I quote, we do have justice on our side, and with you, in the end, we will have that justice. So thank you for your time today.
Right now. So I'll meet you at the restaurant. Forget about it.
Yeah, swear to God, I didn't plan.
Or just in the lobby of our building.